Hello and welcome to Disrupt Your Now, the show for entrepreneurs who are ready to shake things up. Tonight we have an amazing guest, Tressa Yonekawa, and she will correct me if I'm wrong. Bundren has worked with leadership at familiar names like Nike and Apple, blending, and I'm reading this because I don't want to get it wrong, blending passion, intention, neuroscience, communications, and the art of mastering real connection to catalyze living our legacy right now. And I don't usually read introductions, but the reason I wanted to read that is because the right now, living our legacy right now, just really resonates with me, Tressa, because I'm all about someday never comes. So, first of all, welcome to the show. And secondly, I want you to give us a little bit of background of how you got to where you are today, and then we'll talk about what you're doing now.
Oh, Lisa, thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm a big fan of your show and everybody you've
Oh,
had on. So
thank
I'm
you.
really honored to be here.
Thank you.
And the how is that I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things wrong. I started out of the gates as one of those kid entrepreneurs. I felt that money was safety.
Hmm.
So I knew that I needed to make money. When people would ask me when I was a kid what I wanted to be, I'd say the boss. I didn't know what of or what that meant, but I knew that was powerful. So I've always tried to figure things out, and I haven't always done a good job of it. When I first got out of college and was first a leader or put into leadership roles, I was a terrible boss. I was a boss. I was a terrible boss, and I had a team that I really loved come to me and say, "We're leaving unless you get it figured out,
Oh,
unless you understand how to communicate better." And
so
my
were you
whole my
bossy boss, or?
I was a micromanager.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I wanted things done the way I would do them, and I
yeah.
didn't see any different way. And I was terrible. I was the worst of the worst. And so from failing, from being the worst of the worst, and from almost losing, my first company that I created, which was in ancillary healthcare, um, I really had to do a quick uptake and a self-assessment and get really honest about where I was doing things well and where I wasn't, and really make those changes.
Yeah.
So it was painful. It was painful.
It
Growth is
is.
painful.
It's just like learning to ride a bicycle, though. You have to fall off, you have to skin your knees and elbows, and then you get back up and try again. But too many people think as soon as they make a mistake that they're failures, that this is not meant for them. And I'm so glad that you brought that out, because that is the only way that we can learn, is by screwing up things. And
Yes,
often screwing them up badly.
exactly. And not everybody has to. I mean, there are success stories where people did it all right, I'm
Yeah,
sure, somewhere. But most of us
somewhere.
somewhere, but most of us definitely make mistakes, and we have to, I think, to grow and to be the best that we can possibly be. I'll be learning for the rest of my life. I think most entrepreneurs, most top leaders will say the same thing. We try to learn as much as we can. A lot of us have this skill of being maybe not easily distracted, but certainly interested in many things. And so
Yeah.
the more we can learn, the more we can identify what we need to know more about and what we can implement and who we need and all of those things. So I got here to this place being able to talk to you by screwing a lot of things up.
I love that. And I'll tell you, I always say there's something to be said for knowing the absolute worst mistake you've ever made in your life. And I definitely know mine. But even if you just have a bunch of little mistakes, every single thing is a step on that ladder to learning. And I'm with you. We have to continually learn our entire lives, or we become irrelevant. It's like if you have to evolve with the world and keep learning and improving.
Definitely. And I think part of the gift for me was that I had some bosses who were also terrible. So I would say I don't want to be like that. But then when I became like that, because those were my role models,
Yeah.
I really had to take a step back. And now in advising, in coaching, and in consulting with leaders who are really doing it well, inclusive leaders, people who are on like not just trajectories, but expansive catapults. That's really exciting because we get to collaborate and bring all of those messes and successes together.
Uh-huh. Well, and I love that by working with those leaders, you are learning so much from what they're doing right. And then you're working with others that might not be doing right. And you are positively impacting so many lives because there's so many employees who just go to work and they're miserable. I remember one of my first jobs out of college, my boss said, you just don't have that look in your eye. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Pardon me, but I'm like, I was in accounting. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So, and he was a great guy. I loved him, but that's not very good leadership. That's not very good advice. So the fact that you're helping people be better leaders automatically helps everybody that they're leading.
Thank you. And I think that to be a better leader, you have to recognize that you want to be a better leader. Even if you think that that you're the best that's out there, there's always something for us to learn. And one of the biggest things that we're finding now is that those soft skills that we've been talking about for the last 5 or so years, those are now really the hardcore skills of leadership. And
Yes.
so those are often the hardest to learn. Vulnerability is really difficult to learn. Appropriate vulnerability in a workplace setting and in our lives is really difficult to learn. Truth and integrity and all of those things, self-awareness, active listening, all of those pieces that we've considered soft previously now are these skills to have as we move forward and create and live our legacy now, like we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, you definitely did not show your vulnerability. I'm 61. So in the 70s, 80s, late 60s, 70s, 80s, the whole thing was stiff upper lip. You do not show that you're vulnerable. And I love now
Right.
that people are not afraid to do that, but also younger people are having a harder time with the soft skills because so many have grown up digitally and especially with COVID, not especially younger people not learning how to read facial expressions. And some of the military people company that I work with that trains like special forces before they
Right.
go off on missions, they said that one of the biggest things that they have to teach is soft skills. They're supposed to be teaching them tactical mobility and all this stuff, but before they can do that, they have to teach them soft skills. And I was so surprised at that. I shouldn't have been, but I was.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I know that when we went into masks, because my specialty is communication, connection, and my degrees are in communication, I discovered when we went into masks that I read lips a lot, and the facial expressions mean a lot to me, and that's how I do a lot of my work. And so when we went into masks, it got really difficult for me to hear
I'm the same
because,
way.
yeah,
So you were reading
yeah.
you were reading lips, but you were just doing it. You didn't realize you were doing it.
Right, lips and
Yeah.
gestures and all of the things.
Hmm.
And so, and when we learn to read, like when somebody's muscles tense in their neck or in their face, and what that can mean, even if their eyes don't show it, we lose all of those cues. And because less than 10% of what we actively hear, interpret from people is their actual words, the other 90% is from everything else. We're at a big disadvantage when we're in masks.
That's such a great point. And I wear glasses, and I know sometimes I'm talking to my husband, and a lot of times I just take them off. I can't stand to wear them because I'm like at that in between thing. But I'll be like, we'll be talking, and even though I'm close enough to see him, like I have to put on my glasses because it's like what he's saying isn't connecting with my brain. But the other thing about that is my father was blind, and one of my best friends, Hobie Webler, is blind PhD chemist. And he talks a lot about how 85% of what sighted people rely on is what they see. And
Yeah.
we're ignoring all the other stuff, the smells and everything else. But we have to filter out things in order to not go crazy. But that's such a great point that of how much we do rely in communication on seeing things.
Definitely, yeah. And in that communication and connection, we also have a lot of projections and a lot of judgment. So
Yes.
anytime, we bring, well, ourselves included, we can sit with ourselves and go through all of the negative self-talk that's very predominant, unfortunately, normal,
Yeah.
until we take control of that. But anytime we put two people together who haven't seen each other, and I get to do this a lot when I speak, uh, we have to notice first, without speaking to each other, what our judgments are about the other person. And then open up beyond that, really get to know the person. But if we just move forward without having that intentional interaction of really actively listening to each other, we've already decided who the other person is. And then we just search for in our brains all of the information that affirms that. So we're kind of walking misinformation all the time.
Yeah.
All
And
the
we're
time.
always looking for things, as you said, that affirm what we already believe.
Oh yeah.
Looking, so it just becomes this feedback loop that we're not learning from. And it's funny that you say that, because the first time that we met, we had never met before, and we were
Right.
at Speakeasy New York with Steve Sims, and we had to introduce ourselves to each other. So,
Right.
and we're having to listen, not have to, because you want to hear what the other person's saying, but really pay attention to what the other person is saying, and think about what they're saying instead of what you're thinking, right?
Right. Right. And that, you really want to hear, like we wanted to cue in on the things that we could talk about with other people about this person we're meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Also things that were alike, so that we could say, oh, me too, and have some kind of connection there. So
Mm-hmm.
we're constantly sorting for those things. And when we just actively listen, it opens up this whole other level of understanding that we don't have with each other when we're already forward thinking or thinking ahead of the conversation itself.
Yeah, that whole difference between hearing and listening, because you can hear something. I'll give you a good example. I can be like totally ADD, and when my kids were growing up, it's like they'd say things and I would think I heard them. And we were driving from Florida to Virginia, and they were like, "Oh, like it was a dog that had been hit," and
Oh,
"Oh, poor whatever," and they could tell that I wasn't listening. And they're like, "Oh, poor tire." And I'm like, "Oh," and it was a tire laying by the road. And as soon as I went, "Oh," I was like, "Oh my God," they started laughing. I'm like, okay, I realized, but that is the perfect example of, you
yeah.
have things coming in, but you're distracted and you're thinking about other things. So you're not thinking about what people are telling you. When that can become very dangerous.
It can, because then we move forward on that point of view or those presumptions, and then we build our whole story about each other on that. And so one example of that can hit closer to home is that if you are partnered, or if you have someone in your life who's done something wrong, your brain, your emotional state, you want to then catch them doing that thing again, whatever that is, whether that was not doing the dishes or not, whatever that
Mhm.
is. So we pre-sort for that then. And so once we're in trouble for something, once we're identified as not being adequate or something, at what we want to be adequate at, or what somebody else wants us to be good at or attentive to, then that person is going to constantly sort to affirm that, which is why a lot of times in relationships we have the same arguments over and over, and unless we can get under it to what the core of that is, we keep getting beat up and beating each other up verbally, for hopefully only verbally, for
Yeah.
for that thing,
Uh-huh.
because anything that looks like that or smells like that now is going to be called that thing. You
Yeah.
never, right? You always, all of those things.
Mhm.
So when we do that in work as leaders, it's very dangerous, because we don't ever get a chance, an opportunity to guide our people to be truly themselves
Mhm.
in a space where they could be visionary and the outcomes could be better, and they could be contributors and collaborators in better ways. They can be allies, like all of those things that we want to encourage. We actually shut down when we can't get past ourselves.
I just love that you're working with executives of these large companies that, and I'm not saying the ones that I said earlier, infamous for this, but just large companies in general are known for, this is what we do and this is the way you do it. And like, you're a robot at work. And some people within the company used to be encouraged to be visionary and creative, but everybody else was encouraged to just do what you're supposed to do. And I love
Right.
that you're working with these senior executives to get them to understand how they can encourage people to be more creative. And I like it. to call it thinking entrepreneurially instead of just coming to work and doing it by rote, because that way the company is way better off and all of the people end up happier and more fulfilled.
Totally. I mean, and now we can't look at what was happening in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or any time in the past, because everything has changed, and
Yes.
everything has changed very rapidly, especially in the past 3 years. What we're seeing now is that when people can be their own brand wherever they are, if they can have their own personality, if they don't have to be parts of themselves when they show up at work, then we're all happier. And it's not necessarily about getting more out of people, but we do get more out of each other when we can show up fully, and we're not trying to hide those parts of us that we think aren't welcome at work. And so all of this inclusion and belonging work is really substantiated by the happiness factor. And it's not like we're going to keep people in their jobs for 50 years now. Nobody
Yeah.
wants that. It just sounds
Mhm.
suffocating, even to
Yeah.
me, who I'm not going to be in a job for 50 years
Yeah.
anyway, but I never have been. We need to move. We need that fresh air. We need the flow of energy, and we need to know that our potential is respected. The best companies, organizations, and leaders right now are helping people fulfill their dreams. So, where does what we need as a company or as a team meet what you need and want for your dreams, for your future? That's where we're finding the sweet spot, and it's really hard for a lot of leaders to do, because like you said, a lot of people are still in that game of, here's what we need, get it done efficiently, I get a bonus if this happens, all of those things. And now we're needing to think more broad,
Mhm.
more connected, more human centric, and that alleviates a lot of those labeling problems that come in with issues of racism, issues of class, issues of gender, all of those things. If we're human to human, we get to be our whole selves. We respect and honor ourselves and each other. It makes for such a much more engaging, collaborative, and sustainable, healthy culture. And it's not easy. It's really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, it is. And especially in a bigger organization like that, when you have so many layers of people. So, if you're working with a large company like that, do you also have to work with the board, or are you just working with the top executives, or how does that work?
We definitely also work with the board. I work with a couple of consultancies. One is Taproot Ventures at thetaprootway.com, and the other is I work on my own and with other places with Epic Odo. But we work with the board. I mean, the board is foundational to how we're engaging, and we're
Mhm.
seeing companies now where leadership is saying, we found out that this person that we adore, that every one of our branches across the world adores, and they seem to be a gatekeeper and problematic for
Mhm.
this issue of racism, of whatever that is.
Mhm.
So we have decided that even though we love this person and they have not been able to change their behavior, and they're not willing to look at their behavior, that we're letting them go. When
Mhm.
that happens, then people go, oh, well, I guess I am working for a company that I can trust, that is showing up for me, because you've done this pretty big move with somebody who was important to you personally and to the company. We're finding that when we get into that place of integrity as leaders, that then the board also says, oh, well, we need to be on board with this too.
Yeah.
Here we go. And it's a deep dive then into better culture, which is really exciting. Not without pushback. I mean, I'm giving you the cleaned up version,
Oh,
but
yeah.
ultimately, optimally, what we're moving toward are cultures where it's win-win-win.
Mhm.
And we're not just getting the life sucked out of us as people who are working and choosing to work for somebody. We're actually believing in what we're doing. We're actually having confidence and faith that we're all working in everybody's best interest. And as soon as we see or smell that that's not true, we're out.
Yeah, and especially younger people, and especially since COVID, which even though COVID has been hard for everybody and sad and everything, there have been so many great changes that have come about because of it in the workplace, and that have allowed people to continue to work for companies but still have their personal freedom. I mean, I've worked for myself since 1990. I cannot imagine having to go back into the corporate world. So I knew when we first had the shutdown, not that I'm brilliant, but I just knew that once people got a taste of that, being able to be themselves, but still work and get stuff done, that, it really does, it gave companies kind of permission to then free those employees up a little bit.
Definitely, if they could. Now, some companies, I mean, if we functioned without people on site before, and we're giving people the option now if they want to come back, because some people
Mhm.
really thrive on that kind of community.
Yeah.
Those are their friends,
Mhm.
and sometimes family. So if we can give people the option, that's ideal. Some businesses couldn't give
Right.
people that option, and we're seeing people move around.
Mhm.
I have personally, I have friends at very high levels in companies who are negotiating to not stay as long as they might have because they want to now have their family life too. It really made us take a look at how we're living for real.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of changes. There were a lot of divorces. There were a lot of interpersonal things happening during the last 3 years as well, when we were, put into this container together. So now we're like, I just want to live my life. I want to live a big, full, amazing life. I'm not guaranteed tomorrow or even the rest of today. Where am I going to put my energy, my time, my love, my skills, my magic? Where is all that going? Because I don't want to waste it, and I don't want to blow it on someone who doesn't appreciate it.
Yeah, and that is definitely one positive thing that has come out of COVID, that it's made people realize that they have to live for now and not always someday and one day. I always tell people someday never comes.
Right.
Not that we want everybody to be impulsive all the time, but to think deeper and not always be thinking, checking off the boxes and planning for 20 years from now. So,
Right. I mean, there is some of that. Like, let's do that too, but
yeah.
let's do that right here, and then everything else, let's just be living in it and be present, be in our full power, be in permission for ourselves to change the world.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. So you work mostly with large companies. Do you also work with small companies or?
Definitely. I mean, actually, we work mostly with small to mid-range companies.
Okay.
We work with executives individually, and also with individual teams from larger companies. I personally don't have an interest in getting into a big company and trying to change culture for a large company.
Yeah.
My team could definitely do that at Taproot. Right now, we're focused on the mid-sized companies and having so much fun and seeing so much change. And when you can see that shift, and you hear from employees that, wow, our leadership is doing things that we never thought we'd see. Working here is so much better. I've re-upped my commitment to being here. I'm happy to come to work every day. Those things are super impactful and mean a lot to me and to us, because that's what it's about.
It sure is. Can you give us an idea of how you work with the companies to get them started along that path?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. It's really individualized. So not everybody needs the same thing. And
Hmm.
we don't believe in having like a cookie cutter recipe box on the wall where we pick out this plan for this or this plan for
Yeah.
this. We really do have to take a look at, and I think a lot of consultancies start with an excavation or discovery process first.
Right.
At Taproot, we also have what we call CHI, which is the Culture Health Index, which is an assessment, a very accurate, like transformative, and irrefutable assessment of how people are thinking about, considering, and how they hold the values, the mission, and how things are actually working within the company. And it really shows when there's a disparity, which there often is, between how leadership thinks it's going and how the rest of the company thinks it's going.
Yeah.
So we start to work on those pain points to make them more malleable so that we can transform them. And I think that's been one of the most exciting aspects of my work with Taproot, is that these changes can happen actually very quickly. Once we can clearly identify what's happening, we understand how to help people shift that. And leadership is so open to that in most cases. I mean, obviously, they're not going to work with us if they're not, but leadership is very open to, we know we have a good company and we want to make it better, or we're really struggling and we want to survive, or we're going public and we're falling apart at the seams, or any of those things that are happening. It's usually really evident once we get in there. with how to affect change pretty quickly
Mhm.
when leadership will take that into their own self-awareness and do the painful parts first.
That's so cool, though. The fact that they they bring you in because they know they need to do this. So that shows that they're open in the first place. But the fact that they are
Mhm.
so eager to understand what their employees and what their people are missing or want to be better, or the problems that they see, because we can never see all the problems ourselves.
Right, right. We're too close to it. And, we get brought in either by the boards saying you have to do this,
Hmm.
or by, there's enough complaints or people are leaving at such a rate, or leadership is just self-aware enough to say, we know there's something going on, we don't know what it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely applaud all of those different steps that it takes to ask for help,
Hmm.
because as you and I know, and as most people know, that one of the hardest things to do is to be seen, first of all, to be reflected back in what we're doing well,
Yeah.
to be reflected in what we're not doing well, and to ask for help. Why
Yeah.
is asking for help so hard, Lisa?
It is very hard, but it's also hard to be open and be vulnerable and let people know your thoughts and your problems, because so often people turn it against you. So,
Yeah.
it has to go both ways, and even coworkers or friends, just people in general. We have a really bad habit of, if somebody does show their weakness a little bit, too many people have a bad habit of using that as a way to gain power over them. So I can understand why a lot of employees probably are hesitant at first, maybe.
Sure, because it's an unsafe culture. And when we have psychological safety versus psychological lack of safety, that's a huge difference in how we show up, in how we feel confident, comfortable to ask or to identify things that are both good and negative. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, psychological safety is a huge part of that. I mean, to me, it's the foundation of all goodness in any relationship is to have that safety, and the moment that that trust is broken, it's very, very difficult to earn it back. So when we start out at a foundation of psychological safety, or when we see our leaders really working hard and being in pain, trying to
Yeah.
get it right, like going through the steps that we need to go to do it right for us, that's endearing in ways that we respect. And those are leaders that we want to follow. Maybe they didn't start out that way, but the fact that they're doing the work consistently, showing up that way, they earn our trust over time. And the goal is to be somebody that people want to choose to, are happy to follow and to
Yeah.
be a part of and to collaborate with. And that kind of leadership is priceless.
Yeah, and to be able to be that type of leader and have people want to work with you, a company can be stronger than it ever could in any other way. I know a lot of small business owners are probably thinking leadership, if maybe they're even a solopreneur or they only have several employees, they may be thinking, oh, leadership has nothing, to do with me, but it
Right.
always does within your family, your clients, and everybody. So what advice would you give people like that?
Well, honestly, I would say that leadership at every level is a key important foundation to the work that I do and the work that we do at Taproot. We are leaders in our relationships, we're leaders in our lives. So if you're a solopreneur, you're it. And your leadership in your solopreneurship is, I mean, it's all you have.
Yeah.
So it's probably, it's important wherever we're at, in whatever position we're in, but there's never a time when it's more important and impactful than when we're making the decisions, whatever that is.
Mhm.
So your decision to get up in the morning and choose the energetic and the attitude that you're starting with, your decision with knowing how to, like, you just had Pam Pryor on, who's amazing, your
Mhm.
decision to understand your finances, even though for some of us it's like the last thing in the world that we want to
Yeah.
do, like all of those things, your decision with who to collaborate with, who to hire as your mentors, who to align with, all of those things, those are absolutely vital, um, with any kind of leadership, and in being a partner and being a parent, those are leadership positions as well.
Yeah.
So we can't ever look away from leadership once we see the fact that we're leaders in our lives, we're leaders in the world. If we're going to change the world, if we're going to have an impact on anybody else, if we're going to ourselves make a difference, we're leaders.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what you said earlier, live your legacy right now by acting as true leaders and being kind, being thoughtful, being open, being supportive of other people, letting them uncover their strengths and work more towards them. It helps them live their legacy right now as well.
Definitely. What more can we learn about people? How can we contribute? How can we ask questions so people are willing to offer? And how much farther can we go and grow collaboratively together when we ask for people to be all in and we accept that?
Yeah,
It's a part of allyship. It's a part of everything we do. It's a part of being visionary. It's a part of asking, teams to come up with the next great whatever it is, service, product, whatever. That only comes when we feel safe to be wrong, to
for
offer our
sure.
whole selves and be wrong, to be right, to be better, to be worse, all of those things.
That's for sure. Tell us about your two books.
Oh, sure. So one that's coming out soon with Carson Jones and I think it's Kind Investments is his company. This book is co-authored with Laura Mansfield, who's also from Taproot. We've been friends for a decade, and we met in India.
Oh,
Crazy
cool.
story. Yeah, and this book is about leadership. So it's about being a listening leader. It's about exquisite leadership. It's about how to lead with the 8 tenets of leadership that we've discovered work for absolutely every single person for the last almost 30 years of each of our careers. And it's been phenomenal when we introduce these things. And I'm excited to have this book come out. And the other book is about life cycle strategy, and it's about how we can have elegant exits when we do the whole life cycle really well, and really have a plan for that, and really understand people. So it's about how to be more human. How can we even talk about being better leaders until we ourselves practice being better humans?
Yeah. Can you tell us about the 8 tenets? Can you
Yeah,
talk about?
I mean, briefly, we've been
Mhm.
talking about them, and we think we live them until we start to really pay attention to them and practice them and break them down. And so, active listening is one that we've really talked about today.
Mhm.
Vulnerability, integrity, a trust, patience, and allowing is a huge one for leaders, especially those of us who are move, 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 move.
Yeah.
And this place of really hearing people requires patience and allowing. All of the tenets are interwoven. One works better with all of the others, and all of them work better with each one. So these tenets really, when we get into them and focus on each one of them, provide the space of belonging, create the psychological safety consistently. And so we find what we found over 25 plus years, Laura and I both, is that when these tenets are put to use by leaders and by teams, by anybody who's working with us, they start to see that their home lives also are better, their personal lives improve. And then they come back and say, wow, this is really interesting. My whole life is getting better, because these things are not limited to just business, to just our
Yeah.
employment, to just the work we do. These are about how can we be more fulfilled, whole, like actual individualized and actualized
Mhm.
human beings in the world. How can we connect better? And those come from self-awareness and presence. It really sounds so simple until you get into the practice of it, and you realize that it's very hard to show up without extending yourself outward into the marketing and all of the different things that tell us what we need in order to be accepted, or
Mhm.
what we need in order to be famous, popular, all of those things. When we can be wholly ourselves and allow other people to do the same, it's a much more gentle and efficient and beautiful and optimized world.
I don't even know what to say after that because that's just so, I mean, it's so beautiful. And I always talk when I work with clients, I always start with their life. What do you want out of life? What would it be like? Not And that may include money, but most people start with money. How much money do you want to make? And when you can
Right.
get people to kind of let down their guard and be honest with themselves, because a lot of people don't even know what they want, Tressa.
That is so true. I was just talking about money with Bill Hershey actually on another podcast, and what we decided was people need to sit down for a moment, like you ask people to do, and determine for themselves what is actual wealth and success to you. Because for most people, it's actually not the Lamborghini and the 18 houses. For a lot of people, wealth and success is just having what we need and want, being able to help the people we love, being able to be philanthropists to whatever degree we are, and to feel like we can do what we want to do. A lot of us are just like, I don't necessarily need to make billions of dollars. I'm okay making, 100,000 or even 50,000 or whatever that is a year, as long as these basic needs are taken care of and I don't really have to worry. So when we get strung out, it's because we think we have to have this ideal. We project ourselves out into this thing that we're seeing on social media that isn't really for everybody.
Yeah, and the more you know yourself and the more you understand what you really want out of life, then you're able to, and I know we're getting off track a little bit, but then you're able to, if you're an employee, you're able to look for the kind of job that suits you best. If you're a leader, you're able to understand the people who work for you better. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're able to plan your business better. Some of the small business owners that I work with, the most common problem that I see is when people start a business, all they're thinking about is the money. And so they look at everybody else and see what they're doing and they model their business after them. Now, yes, we should learn. We should learn from other people what's working and what's not working, but they build their business like everybody else. And then they may be very successful, but they turn around, they go, why am I miserable? Why am I not happy? I have all this money, but I'm not happy. It's because you didn't build the business you wanted. You built the business somebody else wanted.
Yes, that's such brilliant insight. And that's a lot of my coaching clients who say, all right, I've got everything I've ever wanted and I'm miserable. And I can't sleep at night and all of those things. For that, actually, yes, for that reason, absolutely. And it's sad to see that people work so hard and are in the hustle and do all the things, and then they turn around and look in the mirror and they say, wait a minute, this is part of what I wanted, but who am I?
Yeah, it is really sad because people start realizing that they've spent all this time, on this rat's wheel, going after things that if they've been honest with themselves, it wasn't what they really wanted. They too many people feel like they have to prove themselves to other people.
Yeah, and I always say, make all the money, do all the things, help all the people, be wealthy. Like, don't be afraid of that, because we run into the other side of that, which is people who are in service and feel guilty somewhere in their systems about receiving money.
Right.
So the other part of that is, be as wealthy as you can possibly be, but do it on your terms.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm talking more about, is that it's not just about the money, it's figuring out what it is that you really want out of life. And that's why I'm so big on helping people build a business that means more than money, because make as much money as possible, but when you have a bigger purpose, it makes the money even more sweet, because you can use it in ways that maybe it only helps you, but it's at least you're using it in a way that you really want instead of somebody else.
Lisa, what is your bigger purpose?
It's hard for me to vocalize that, but I was actually thinking about it earlier today. It really is hard for me, but I feel like for some reason I've always wanted to lift up other people and to help them. I'm going to get emotional. Help them feel like they fit in better and help them find their own purpose. But I have a really hard, but that's still very nebulous.
But you do that. So you do that. You do that in this show. You do that in all of the work that you do. You do that with your driver, that I'd love to hear more about too is now winning races and supporting veterans causes. You do that, and you're a huge advocate for that. So it's beautiful that even though you don't perceive that you're directly using your skills and magic and gifts in that way, you really are. And when we sit down and talk to people, I think we find that a lot. And thank you for your vulnerability and your emotion, because that means that it means a lot to you. That means that you're living your legacy.
And it comes from life experiences, like my grandfather killing himself when he was 5, and my grandmother trying to 8 years later, and my father was blind, grew up in dire poverty. I mean, I had a great childhood, so I don't want it to sound like it was awful, but there are all these things that all of us have happened to us throughout our lives, and we can all learn from them and use those things to help other people, or we can feel sorry for ourselves or be angry or take it out on other people. But with Daddy, it's ironic that the fact that he went blind as a child, I've realized after I became an adult, that's a huge part of the reason that I think differently, because all those years I watched him do whatever he wanted. It didn't matter. He had a lathe, he did woodworking, he rode horses, owned a business, shot guns, all this stuff. And I literally never heard him say no, that he couldn't do something. Of course, there were things he shouldn't do, but he never used that as an excuse. And most of us use whatever it is as an excuse because we're afraid of failure. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, the things I have not tried because I'm afraid of failure. And I'm just now at this point in my life learning that it, like, whatever, I fall on my face. Yeah. And people laugh. Okay. But it's taken me this long, to get comfortable with that. And my kids, of course, are very different. They'll do all the things, and I'm super grateful for that. So we, as different people, it's not even different generations with this, in this case, it's just different people have different comfort levels because of our points of view, because of our lenses, because of, our experiences. And the question is, in living our legacy, if you're present right now, would you change anything about right now? Because if you would, do it. It's impossible to think, I want to go back and change anything. I'm grateful for everything that's happened in most of all of us have different things that, are sad and horrible and traumatic, and also beautiful and brilliant and kind and good. Would we change our lives and not be here right now?
Right.
In this place. And there's no place I'd rather be right in this moment than talking to you, Lisa, about this super important, highly motivating to me resource, which is fulfilling our lives.
Yeah,
which is
and
being great leaders.
Yes, and to the point that you just made, I always remind people, you cannot change one thing without changing everything else. So, learn from the things, the bad things that happen to you, adapt, adjust, whatever, but don't sit here and live your life through that lens of being afraid of whatever it was. So, like, not that I'm perfect, because I'm not, but like in my case, when I was younger, I used to feel like, when I was a teenager, I used to be like, does this mean I'm going to kill myself? And I didn't want to, but there's this part of you when you're a kid that looks at all the shortcomings of the people around you. So that's an example of, as I grew up, I'm like, no, because I'm in charge of myself, but I've lost so many people through the years. And so it just became part of my fabric of wanting to help other people. So that's what we need to do, is focus on the lessons that we've learned instead of the bad things that happened.
Yes, and you bring up a really good point, and David Meltzer talks about this a lot, and I love him so much. Is, how can we be in service? How can we just live our lives in service, and have aspects of our lives where we're in service and we're getting paid for that, where we're in service and we're not getting paid for that, and time when we're sleeping, and if we're doing those things, there's so much joy, and there's so much learning, and there's so much living, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah. can you, I don't know if you could do this or not, but do you have like any favorite story, like any favorite transformational story that you can tell without divulging, confidence or anything?
Absolutely. Well, I think, you know, one of my favorite stories is of a group of partners who started a company and it blew up. And they had now this incredibly popular company, and they were not getting along. And so they were trying to figure out how to exit a couple of people, or, how do we break this up? How do we split it
Mhm.
up? All of these things. When we got in there and actually did the excavation, we found a couple of things going on internally in-house with their management, that we helped them fix. And through that pulling together, they were able to see that they really did, like, they started this because they liked each other. They were buddies.
Yeah.
So we got back. It's like any relationship, right? When we go back to the magic or to the love that was there when we first started, in their case, this deep friendship and this camaraderie and this trust in each other, which starts to get eroded if we're not taking care of that relationship,
Hmm.
especially when a lot of money starts to become involved where it wasn't before. But they were able to, using all of these 8 tenets, they were able to see each other as human beings again.
Oh,
They were
that's so
able to work
cool.
together. Yeah, and they ended up growing their business even more and then having a very successful sale that they were all happy with. And I'm still friends with all of them, and they get in touch once in a while and talk about how really incredible their lives have been, and that they feel it would have been very much different if they would have kept, going in the direction that they were going. So just that, like, hey, listen, we're not getting along, can you help us?
Yeah.
Um, just that transformed everything, including their wealth. And
Yeah.
that's something that excites me, that when we can see each other as humans again, when we
Hmm.
can remember where we started, not going back to that place, we've changed, but when we can get to that place where, listen, we're still people who care about each other. Let's get past all these projections that we have now developed about each other and move forward from right here
Hmm.
better. It's amazing, and it can be so easy and graceful if we have the patience and allowing for that.
And oftentimes the things that drive us crazy about each other when we get into situations like that are the very things that drew us together in the first place, kind of like couples. But we forget,
Exactly.
we
Yes.
we get so caught up in the day to day. And the fact that y'all were able to go in and help them, not only were they able to stay together and be happy and make a lot more money and exit, but think of all the people that work for them. And always look at the ripple effect, Tressa. So
Yeah.
there's helping them, there's the employees, but it ripples out through the families and then through the generations. You're literally positively affecting generations of people. And I just love that.
It's exciting. Yeah, I've been hired by one of the primary's kids, who was, part of that whole thing at that time, and ended up being part of a larger company too, and wanting to make some changes. And like that to me is the best advertisement in the world. Like, I don't need to do ads when people's families are hiring me to do the work
Yes.
that I do because I did such good work with their parents. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that's exciting. I think I'm living my legacy in that
That
way.
is
But yeah.
beautiful. And I want to say, I love that you call it excavation because, and most people call it discovery, but I love that you call it excavation because that visual of digging deep and finding the things that you don't even realize are there.
Yeah, and a lot of the times finding the roots,
Yes. Yeah, because
so we're not just
when people talk about discovery, it's kind of more like we need to discover what you have. But by you saying excavation, that's like, no, everybody's got to get in here and dig deep together.
right. And we have to remember the roots that are down here so that we can start to build from that foundation. And that's
Yeah.
that's to me, that's excavation, and that's doing it well.
Yeah. I was going to show you this is our driver's dad, Ryan. Enjoy the half brain we
Oh,
share. Ryan and I are so alike. And when we first started working together 4 years, he used to jokingly say we share a brain. And a couple of years into it, he's like, no, we share half a brain. And we're so much alike. We took the Colby test, and you can almost lay our scores over each other. We're only like off 1 point on a couple things. It's
Yeah,
really bizarre. I feel like he's my brother from
I
another
love
mother.
that.
It's really wild. Yeah.
I
So
love that.
hey, Ryan.
I've seen
What?
you in a couple of different settings now, Lisa, where people really are attracted to you, really are want to know who you are. You
Oh,
draw people in, you connect with people beautifully, you light up the room, and you elevate the conversation and the game. And I've
oh,
seen you do that in business, and I've just it doesn't surprise me that you
oh.
have people who connect with you in that way and who share half the brain with you.
Thank you so much. That makes me feel good. And it reminds me of my husband and I, when we first met and we were dating, and Tom's more of an introvert. Well, I'm an introvert too, but I'm an extroverted introvert. And when we first met, he's like, it's like you walk in a room and the room parts and everybody wants to come and talk to you. And I'm like, oh, really? I'm just me, but I'm not bragging, but it makes me feel good to make other people feel good.
And we feel that, and
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have met you. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
I'm so grateful to have met you too. And you met Ron's son, Brian, at, I believe y'all met in New York, the tall, really
oh,
tall guy that was with me
okay.
part of the time. Yeah, Brian White
Yes.
is Ron's son, Colin Garrett's
Okay.
older brother. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so he's CEO of 1111 Veteran Project now, and he's Army, and their other brother's Army as well. So
Mm,
our mission together is very, very personal. It's not a gimmick like, okay, what can we do to get sponsors for Colin? I mean, it would have been much easier if we just did it like everybody else did it, or does it. But we wanted to do something in a way that would help other people. And as a matter of fact, the very first meeting I ever had with them, and I'm getting off topic, but this is leadership. The very first
this is
meeting I
the
ever had
topic.
with them
Yeah.
is Ron told me, I was meeting with Ron and Colin, and he said, I told Colin that we'll support his career in any way that we can, but I want it to be about more than entertainment, more than racing. And I want him to figure out when he's 40 years old or 50 years old, what he can look back on and how he can realize that he impacted other people's lives and helped other people. So to me, it's beautiful to see that in action now.
Mm. And will you just give a synopsis for people who are new to your show right now about what this is that you're talking about? Because it's brilliant.
Yeah, so as quickly as I can, and Ron knows I'm a blabbermouth, so it's hard for me to be fast. But all the other teams, or pretty much all sponsorship, they go get a sponsor. They're like, you get this many tickets or whatever, you get your logo owned, and it doesn't matter what sport or festival or whatever it is. That's the way it works. And we're like, you know what? We want to help people through this, and we really want to make a difference for the companies. We don't want it to be like, oh, just handing us money. So we approach sponsorship more as B2B consulting for the companies. We work with them. What
Mm,
is the problem that you have, and how can we help you fix it? Because we have a huge team with decades of experience, different in various expertise. And then we work with them to solve their business problem, and then whatever money doesn't have to go to put the race car on the track, instead of us just hoarding it up for the next race, we give it away. By either we give what we call kind of like scholarships to small businesses that are owned by veterans and military spouses. We pay for medical treatments for veterans, military families. We have philanthropists who come in and will pay to have a really small micro business on the car. Like we had the first Braille paint scheme for my friend Hobie that I mentioned, and he
I
was
heard
launching a
that.
new product. So we had some companies came in and sponsored the car, and then we had philanthropists put up the rest of the money. So we were able to get the car on the track and promote these businesses, but we were able to have this really cool Braille paint scheme that promoted Hobie's new company, but also raised awareness of, have you ever even seen Braille? Do you even know what it is? You know what I'm saying? And so everything that we're doing has a higher purpose. And
So
we're
what kind of
helping,
car, what kind
sorry,
of
go
car
ahead.
and who are we rooting for?
Okay,
Like
so his name
which
is
races?
Colin Garrett, And when he races in NASCAR, he races in the Xfinity Series. So people who are not familiar with NASCAR, it's the level right below Cup. So Cup is like Jeff Gordon and people like that. It's the level right below that. And I say when we're racing, because the way that we're doing it, it's harder to get funded because you've got to get companies to understand because what we're doing is so different. And we have to go to them as consultants and get them to understand it. But so he races NASCAR Xfinity Series when he's racing there. And he also races in IMSA, which is International Motorsports Association, I think. And I apologize if that's wrong, but BMW road courses. And that's when you've been seeing him win a lot because he just loves road courses. I mean, he's great at NASCAR anyway. But Tressa, he just turned 22 and he didn't even start racing till he was almost 15. Unlike most people who grow up racing karts when they're like 3 or 4, like children start ballet and t-ball, most professional racers start racing go-karts when they're like 3 or 4. And he didn't do that. He just was like, I think I want to learn to drive a race car when he was almost 15. And then 4 years later was at the next to the top level of NASCAR. So I'm really proud of Colin. I'm so proud to be working with him. And I kind of feel like he's like my extra son or nephew or something like that, you know?
I love that. So I have a question about leadership here.
Okay.
What about you as a leader has helped this dream come true for Colin and everybody involved?
Well, the dream is still coming true. You know, we're still struggling to get the funding in because we are doing it so differently. But I think for myself, and it's hard for me to talk about myself. Brian knows I'm not really good at being introspective and talking about myself, but I think it's leading with my heart, you know? And when we had first started working together and I had told him, you have to figure out a way that you're the only driver that can do whatever it is that you're going to do for these companies. And it just so happened that a few weeks later that this veterans organization, free physical and mental health treatments, job training and placement, that kind of thing, they're here in the county that we are, and they're located at Virginia International Raceway. They contacted me and wanted me to develop a national awareness campaign for them. And I was like, okay, they had no paid employees. So if I took any money, it took that was money that would have gone to medical treatments. And even if I didn't care about that, it doesn't do you any good to have a national awareness campaign without money to pay for a national platform. And so I called Ron and I'm like, can we do this? And we were just going to have their logo and they're small. We were going to, you know, do this thing and I was going to work with them pro bono. And it ended up, we just kept going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole and had this dream of, oh my gosh, what if we could do something totally different that could really help change people's and families' lives. And like I was talking about earlier about the ripple effect from what you do, we know that by starting with the military, because the military is such a true cross-section of America, that by starting with the military, that will ripple out and help people, you know, everybody. It helps those families and those generations, but their friends, their families. And, you know, Hobie's a great example. He's obviously not military because he was born blind, but he got to be on a NASCAR car for 3 different races with this Braille paint scheme. So
that's so cool. That Braille paint scheme is cool. And thank you for going to that edge of talking about and demonstrating leadership that comes from the heart and is backed by the acumen, the intelligence, the wisdom, and the choice to make positive business moves to help other companies to put yourself out there to do that. That to me is beautiful leadership. And so thank you for talking about that.
Well, you know, we crowdfunded the first Xfinity Series race because we formed the team like 2 months before the first race. We're like, we don't have any money. So we crowdfunded it. People were making fun of us. Oh, the people's team, you know, like jokingly, but we beat our $200,000 goal in about a month. And we were able to raise enough to pay for stem cell treatments for a veteran who has multiple sclerosis caused by exposure to chemicals while on active duty. And so within that insular world of NASCAR, I mean, they love our guys, so it was jokingly saying the people's team, but then it transitioned into the people's team,
Yes,
and
yes, I
and
love that.
that was so cool to see because it's helping people in all different areas realize, hey, you can help other people and help yourself at the same time. Ryan
And we
said,
should.
Ron said, she doesn't let the dream go. She's awesome at the big picture. Thank you, Ron. But but I'm like a dog with a bone. And sometimes people are probably like, shut up, will you just let it go? But if I see something that I feel like is worth going for, I'm all in.
That makes you an amazing leader. And
Oh,
I've watched you put this together just since New York, which hasn't been that many months. I know you've been working on it for a long time before that, but to see it all start to happen, and it's just starting to happen for you
yeah.
is an exciting place. And to see that you are leading with your heart, and you're
Yeah.
also making good decisions. And do you feel like you're living your legacy right now?
I really do. And I feel like I mentioned earlier, it comes from all these things in my childhood, and
Yeah.
it's like they're culminating now in our mission. And it wasn't even on my radar before, other than knowing how it affected me. And I'd worked with a NASCAR driver before. I worked with a Daytona 500 winner. So it wasn't that I wasn't in that world before, but it took the right group of people, Colin and Ryan and me, and putting our brains together, and it all started with, not how can we do this in a way that gets us money and sponsors. It
Right.
started with, how can we do this in a way that we can get the car on the track and help other people, and someday be able to be on the track every week, but how can we do it so that it's focusing on helping other people?
That's beautiful. And that's the epitome of legacy to me is, how can we be in our highest vibration and how can we be in service?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and you do
Thank
that
you.
every day, Tressa. The number of people that you help by helping these companies and by helping these executives be better leaders, you're helping hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people over the years because of that ripple effect.
Yeah. Thank you. My goal is to get to the top because the top can get to more people.
Yes.
So me by myself, just standing on a street corner, I'm not going to have that huge of an impact. But if we can help leaders meet us and meet their people, then we can have, like you said, that ripple effect impact, which is all I want.
And people forget that leaders are people too. They're
Even the
just a
leaders
person
forget.
like we are.
Even the
So,
leaders forget that they're just people,
yes, yeah.
and that in itself can be transformative. And being humans is a pretty spectacular place to be, even in this rather messed up world right now.
It
So
sure
the
is.
more we
And
can, yeah,
I bet you that a lot of the leaders, like you said, even they sometimes don't remember that they're just people, but I bet it feels so good for them when they do let go and they do allow themselves to be human. I can just
they
imagine how
expand
freeing that feels to them.
totally, and their people see that and they like them more, and
Yeah,
we will work more and harder for and with people that we like.
that's so true. Thank you so much for being on here with me, Tressa. I want you to tell everybody how they can find out more about you and where you're speaking next. That they may be if you're speaking at a public thing that they may be able to go to.
Yeah, the next one is actually the next speaking engagement is going to be in Portland, Oregon in October, and I believe that's a closed keynote for a healthcare system. But I'll keep you updated, and you can find me at thetaprootway.com, the most easily. So Taproot Ventures and thetaprootway.com. And Lisa, it has been such an honor. This has been one of my most favorite conversations. I'm in the middle
Oh,
of the woods this month writing, and it's hot, and when you reached out to ask to have this conversation, I've been waiting to talk with you. So I am
oh,
honored, and this has been so much fun, and I've learned so much, and I feel so inspired. Thank you.
oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And my heart is full. And I'm so glad that we met at Speakeasy, New York, and if it weren't for Steve Sims,
Oh my
we
gosh.
wouldn't have met. So it just shows you,
Steve D. Sims.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
he
just
doesn't look
shows.
like an angel.
No,
He's an angel.
that's for sure. But that shows people out there. You never know. Who knows somebody that might be the perfect person that you should meet. And I feel blessed that we met each other in New York.
I do too. And I look forward
Yeah.
to seeing you in LA at Speakeasy LA.
Yeah. Thank you so much. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
See y'all next week.